Hey, welcome. Today, we're jumping into an industrial safety protocol that I know sounds a little technical, but stick with me because its main idea is something that's powerful for all of us. It's all about a tiny change that literally saves lives by shifting from just trusting a system to actually proving it's safe. So let's just start with the big question right up front. What's really the difference between trust and proof? In our everyday lives, we kind of use them interchangeably, but when you're working with heavy machinery, the gap between those two words can be the difference between going home at the end of the day or not. We're going to see why demanding proof isn't about being paranoid, it's about survival. All right, to get why the solution is so brilliant, you first have to really understand the problem. And the problem is something called hazardous energy. Think of it as this invisible, silent power that's just lurking inside machinery, even when you're staring at it and it looks completely, totally off. Now, when we hear hazardous energy, most of us just picture an electrical outlet, right? But the reality is way more complex. We're talking about an electrical arc flash, which is basically a controlled explosion of pure energy. It's the crushing weight of a massive part just hanging there, held up by gravity. It's superheated steam trapped in a pipe, or the insane force of high-pressure fluid just waiting for a way out. Every single one is a hidden trap waiting for one tiny mistake. So, for decades, the go-to way to deal with all this danger was a system called LOTO. And honestly, on the surface, it seems like a pretty solid, common-sense way to handle things. The idea behind LOTO is pretty simple. You turn off the machine's main power source, say a circuit breaker, and then you physically put a padlock on it so it can't be flipped back on. Then you slap a big tag on it that says, "Danger, do not operate." A physical lock and a clear warning. Makes total sense, right? What could go wrong? Well, here's where the whole story pivots. Is that lock, that little piece of metal, really an absolute 100% guarantee that a multi-ton press is completely dead, that it's totally safe to put your hands inside? And there it is, the fatal flaw. Lotto, at its core, is a system that runs on trust. You trust that your coworker locked out the right circuit breaker in a panel full of them. You trust there's no leftover pressure in a hydraulic line. You trust that a heavy component won't slowly drift down. The whole system is based on assumptions, not on cold, hard certainty. This is where one extra letter in the name signals a massive, massive revolution in how we think about safety. It takes that old system and builds it into something way, way more powerful. Just look at this side-by-side comparison. This is the whole game changer right here. Lotto is about restraint. It's about stopping someone from turning the machine back on. But Lotto is about verification. It shifts the entire culture from one of trust to one of absolute physical proof. It's no longer good enough to think the machine is off. Now you have to prove it. So, what is this revolutionary new piece of the puzzle? It's the tryout. It's so simple, it's brilliant. After you've put all the locks and tags on, the worker walks right over to the machine's control panel and physically tries to start it up. They hit the on button, and if absolutely nothing happens, no hum, no click, no movement, that is the proof. That's the moment you know it's safe. And you can see here how it fits into the whole process. All the other steps are still there. You still prepare, you still shut down, you still isolate and lock everything out, you still have to deal with that dangerous stored energy. But step 7, the tryout, that's the non-negotiable moment of truth. It's what turns the whole thing from an act of faith into a scientific fact. Okay, so you might be thinking, sure, pressing a button to try out an electric motor makes sense, but what about all those other weird energy types we talked about? How does Lotto handle those? And this is where you see how deep the thinking goes. The system anticipates these hidden threats. For example, hydraulic fluid under pressure isn't just strong, it can be so powerful it injects itself right through your skin. So you don't just lock the pump's power, you have to physically bleed the pressure from the lines. For a heavy part that could fall, you don't just trust the brakes, you install heavy-duty physical blocks to hold it up. The tryout then proves that those safeguards actually worked. Now, this all sounds incredibly thorough, but it brings up a fair question. Why is this extra step so critical? I mean, if people are trained properly, shouldn't the old Lotto system be good enough? Well, the answer has everything to do with how our brains are wired. The simple fact is, even the best, most careful professional is still human. When you're under pressure to get a machine back online, or maybe you've just done the same job 1,000 times, it is so easy for tiny shortcuts to creep in. They call it procedural drift, and it's dangerous because it happens so slowly you don't even realize you're putting yourself at risk. And this chart explains exactly why. Complacency. I've worked on this thing 100 times. I don't need to double check. Or outcome bias. Well, I skipped that step last week and nothing bad happened, so it must be safe. The tryout is designed to be a hard stop for all of that. It's a mandatory, cognitive reset, a physical act that cuts right through those mental shortcuts every single time. So it all comes down to this really fundamental change in philosophy. It's about building a system that's designed for the real world, not just a perfect world that only exists on paper. I think this quote from the source material just says it all with absolute chilling clarity. Hazardous energy does not respect administrative policies. It only yields to physical isolation and empirical verification. You can have the world's greatest safety manual, but the laws of physics do not care what's in your binder. 1,000 volts of electricity or a 10-ton press only respects one thing: proof that it has zero energy. And that's what Lotto delivers. So I want to leave you with this thought. This principle of moving from just trusting a process to demanding real empirical proof, it has implications that go so far beyond a factory floor. In our incredibly complex world of digital systems, automated finance, and intricate medicine, maybe this is the most important question we can ask ourselves. Where else are we just trusting when we really ought to be demanding proof?